Good evening. Good evening, everybody. I don't know why I'm stumbling my words. For those that are in, God bless you. Tuning in. Um, Thank you for tuning in on the second episode. Or, yeah, I'll call it episodes because I'm going to be transitioning these into podcasts. I'm almost done with wearing the hardware and stuff that I need for the podcast, doing the intro, the music, and all that. It's a little bit more work than I anticipated. Prophet Kalila, sister, love you. God bless you. So be on the lookout for that. It's gonna be coming out. I gotta finish up setting up the streaming, so you'll be able to share with your friends and family. And again, I think 2 weeks ago I started and I explained where Design to Get Up came from. Um, Last week I couldn't get on. I want to be consistent doing this. I want to do this consistently and be able to make sure all of you know that I'm going to be on every Thursday at 7:30. I'm going to be doing these by myself, but I'm also going to be having some cool Michaels. How you doing, brother? I'm also going to be having some great guests. I'm not going to say any names now. I'm excited just to be able to finish up confirming some things. So be on the lookout for that. For this to be not just teachings, but messages that encourage you in your recovery, past trauma, um, because of the way that we have been designed. That's my title. That's my thing. Designed to Get Up. And today we're going to be going on having a conversation about recovery. So I have three main points that I'm going to be talking about. So make sure that you like, comment, and share, and send this to your friends that might have gone through something or are going through something, need some words of encouragement, or just some tools and strategies to be able to get their minds, their soul, their spirit, their life into right. Uh, Today, if I didn't make it clear already, we're going to be talking about recovery, and in the process of me putting all these notes together, a lot of things from my past, a lot of things, even from the present, the things that kept coming up to mind, and it was really a healing process. Just writing is kind of is my thing, even though I haven't put anything out there. I spend a lot of time writing. I spend a lot of time just putting out the wisdom the Holy Spirit gives me into a pad, into paper. So this was a really good process for me. I really enjoyed today's teachings. Ignacio te bendiga. God bless you, Stephanie. So without any further ado, we're going to be talking about recovery, and I think there's really interesting points that I have for you this evening. Um, we think about we don't really usually think about recovery as something that is a process. Um, we think that it's something that happens with time, something that is random, something that's just going to happen. A lot of the things that I've heard in the past, give it time, or take it one day at a time, or think these things will happen. You have to pray, you have to encourage yourself, you have to connect yourself. And these are things that we hear often, but the way that my mind thinks and the way that I feel for people that are going through certain situations is, if I can only explain certain concepts, and if I can only explain feelings and emotions, and I can only explain tendencies that we are able to use as tools and strategies to be able to recover from a healthy perspective, then it's even better. Because yes, we need friends and we need family and we need prayer, but there comes a time in the midst of the darkness or the hard times and challenges, have tools and instruments to be able to position ourselves for success, then it's going to be a little bit harder to recover. So you can't focus on the area. You can't focus on the area that needs recovery when your attention is geared towards what caused the trauma and not what needs to be healed. I made this point because even in conversations, in counseling, and in personal experience, the process of recovery didn't really start until you take, or won't start until you take your mind out of the place of what happened and go into paying attention of what is being affected and what is hurting. I'll just give you a little story. November of last year, I got into a little fender bender. It wasn't even my fault. I was at a stop sign, with my son. It was like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. I was at a stop sign, and this teenage girl, she wasn't paying attention. She was on the phone. She hit my car, and it was one of those 4-day weekends. I'm about to start my 4-day weekend with my son, and I was at a stop sign, and she hit me. And at the moment, I got angry. I was scared. I didn't know what was going on. Chris was fine. Chris was in the car seat. He barely knew what happened, but I got the whiplash. Like, I was like, oh my God, she hit me pretty hard. So I got out of the car. She was hysterical. She was crying. I wasn't feeling anything. I was just about to go home after I called the insurance. But the police officer was like, no, go to the ER and get yourself checked and see what's going on with you. So I went to the ER after all the adrenaline and everything was still going on. I didn't feel anything. They gave me medication. I woke up the next day like sore. Chris was fine because he was strapped in his booster seat. That I was sore, my neck, my back, everything was sore. Um, and this story came up to mind as I was developing this because it's natural when it comes to the physical state, you are going to recover in spite of the trauma. You're And when it comes to the emotional, when it comes to the psychological, when it comes to the even the spiritual, the emotional state, that is something that we need to be able to understand. At the end of the day, you will recover in spite of it. All comes into the place of where are we putting our attention in. And this is all going to make sense once I start making my points. So point number one, if you're going to take notes, if you're going to put it in the chat, you're going to recover in spite of your trauma. And how you're going to do this is because you're going to need to be able to separate who and what caused the trauma from what it is that needs to be healed. What caused your trauma and who caused your trauma is not what needs to be healed. It's for us to be able to see and look into what got hurt, what got injured in the place of when the trauma happened. Effort and intention in our place, in our desire to recover, in the circumstance, in the person, in the situation, in the accident, in the incident, and our minds and our emotion go and stay in that place. But that situation is not the thing that needs to go back into the place of your trauma and desire to fix it or change it, because it already happened. And it's hard for us, and it's hard for you, and sometimes to be able to understand, like, and admits like it happened. You cannot take it away. You cannot change it. You cannot fix it. You can't go back in time and put it in a place, in a situation that is convenient to you or your emotional state. You cannot begin to recover as long as your strength and your energy is based on what happened and why it happened and who did it. It is a need to focus on the science and the symptoms of what's being hurt. The doctor that treated me, he didn't ask me, or he didn't focus on how did the accident happen, or why did the teenage girl hit me, or was I paying attention, or was she paying attention? That was none of his concern. His concern was pinpoint areas in my body, in my neck, in my back, in my shoulder blades, and everything that was hurting, so he can treat it from the place of what hurt in that moment, and not treat the incident, the trauma, the accident. And we don't look at it from this perspective many times because our emotions are attached so much to what happened in a certain time and place and who did it, that it is easy to abandon the need to be able to recover and get and move on from that place. And we find ourselves having the same conversations over and over. We find ourselves bringing things back to ourselves in a place of now anxiety, in a place of depression, in a place of sadness and isolation and loneliness, because there's a pursuit of trying to change what caused the trauma or who caused the trauma, instead of getting into a place where we are doing soul healing. Angel, how you doing, Obed? And instead of getting into a place of doing soul healing, instead of getting in contact with counselors, instead of getting in contact with therapists, instead of reaching out to your brothers and sisters, instead of reaching out to a therapist to be able to address the things that are hurting and why they're hurting and what got affected, instead of trying to address something that has no way of changing ever. The traumatic event is not disappearing. So you can't pursue healing by trying to make trauma disappear. Healing, you can't pursue healing by trying to make trauma disappear. I'm going to read Romans 3 and 25, and then we'll move on from this point. Romans 3 and 25 says, God presented Jesus as a sacrifice for sin. People are made right with God when Jesus sacrificed his life, shedding his blood. This sacrifice shows that God was being fair when he held back and did not punish those who sinned in time past. That's Romans 3 and 25. I wanted to bring this up to just give you an example of how it happens, right? When it comes to the topic of redemption, God didn't restore us to him by erasing the memory of sin. God didn't restore or redeem us. God didn't call us back to him by erasing the reality of sin or erasing the reality of sin past. He addressed what was keeping us in bondage, that he was addressing the actual culprit, the actual pain, what actually was keeping us in bondage, what actually was keeping us in death, was actually keeping us in pain. It is not erasing the memory of your past. You won't be able to erase, even when it comes to your trauma of things that you've done and the guilt and the shame that we deal with many times. We're not able to recover because we continuously remember, go back into, I cannot believe that I did that. I cannot believe that I behaved in this way. I acted in this way. I can't believe that I did this to this person. The memory of what happened is always going to be there. Now, the reality of the present, the reality of who Christ is, that he died, that he is the one that replaced death with life. He is the answer. He's the Alpha and the Omega. That is how God addressed the pain and the illness and the disease. When it comes to us, our recovery has to be in the place of I acknowledge and I understand that this happened, whether it was my fault or not. And if I'm going to move in the example of who Christ is, am I going to have grace? Am I going to have mercy on myself? Am I going to have mercy over the people that sin or the situation and people that transgress against me? Or am I going to hold on to that memory and make it what is primary in my life in order to move on? So that was the first point. You will be covered in spite of your trauma. Your trauma is not what you need to heal. You need to be able to heal the team in spite of your trauma. Number two, and I think this is something that's very important that we don't think about very much. When it came to the teenager hitting me, right? Her ignorance is the thing that led to my injury in the incident. We need to let go of this idea that hurt always comes from a place of hate. That's the second point. Hurt doesn't always come from a place of hate. Hurt doesn't always come from a place of vengeance. And it's difficult to understand this. And when you think about it, it's going to make sense as we go through these points. But we need to let go of that idea, oh, this person hurt me because they hate me, because no. The reality is that sometimes pain is delivered to us via ignorance. And it's difficult to be able to address that pain and that trauma that comes from a certain situation or a person when it has been delivered to you from a place of ignorance. It wasn't the willingness that they had to hurt you on purpose, is that they were not aware of what was happening. And they were behaving from a place of what they understood or what they do. Acts 17 and 30 says, truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked. Commands all men everywhere to repent. Ignorance is to be unaware. Ignorance is to be unaware or not have the full definition or understanding of a concept, just having the not being aware of what is surrounding you and not having full definitions and understanding. A lot of times we see in social media and we see in a conversation that we have with people, and this is something that really irks me many times when we are addressing people as enemies. It's almost as there is this desire to explain or to express the reason why you are going through something or the reason why you're exposed to a certain challenge or pain or trauma or situation, whether it be betrayal, whether it be against you, whatever it might be. The immediate response is that this person is a hater. When in reality, you had to deal with people that aren't aware of their trespasses against you. You will encounter people that will inflict trauma upon your mind, upon your soul, upon your life, and they were never really aware of what they were doing because they didn't know how to behave in that moment. They didn't have the foundational understanding. They were not discipled. They were dealing with their own trauma and they were addressing life and they were addressing you from the place of them not being healed. So it's not that they hated you. It's not that they have something against you. It's not that they really tried to destroy your life. It is that they were behaving from a place of ignorance. And it's not for us to think that all ignorance makes them dumb or anything like. It's not that. It's that we've come to, I've come to the realization, and I think most of us have come to the realization. There's a lot of people who just don't know how to deal with trauma, how to deal with friendships, how to deal with relationships, how to deal with Christianity, how to deal with the church. And so they start learning how to deal with things from a place of how they perceive pain. And it's very important for us to see it because it will release you from anger. It will release you from developing your own hate towards the person. It will release you from now creating this cognitive dissonance about how to deal with people, because now you're developing mistrust or distrust in you and how do you deal with people. Don't become ignorant in the way that you associate with people or the way that you deal with people because of the trauma that you have been. Cycle has to end at some point. See, don't make people the victim of your pain. Don't make people the victim of your trauma because you failed to recover and understanding. That person just didn't know what they were doing. That person just didn't realize what they were doing. And even though it hurt, we need to get to the place where are we enough to understand, like, you know what? I'm gonna have to have mercy and like God did, overlook the ignorance of their ways. If they were ignorant, you may never, this is something that I understand when you're dealing with something from this perspective, that you may never get an apology or an authentic apology because the trauma they caused you does not relate to the way they can to what they can relate or perceive or understand. So they cause trauma from the place and the perspective of ignorance. And so the apology that you might get, if you get any, is going to be very subtle or subdued. It's going to come from a place of they didn't really understand what they did to you. And are you going to be growing enough? And are you going to put yourself enough to the point where you will understand this and you will be able to have closure? And if you need closure, if you want closure, by understanding, you know what, there's nothing, absolutely nothing I can do about that because there's nothing they can do about that. They yet to get to the place where they understand what they've done and what they need to do in order to be able to redeem the situation, to restore relationships, restore friendships. And we don't have control. We cannot control people's minds, their actions, their desires. We're not God. So don't delay your recovery waiting on the acknowledgement of the ignorant. That was point number two. Don't delay your recovery waiting on the acknowledgement of the ignorant. And we'll move into the last point. Been 21 minutes. I'm going to try to keep this at 30 minutes. Psalm 27:14 says, wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Give me 1 second. I think I had some extra points here. Don't do your yes. Excuse me. All right. I'm gonna have to move my notes here. Almost done. Thank you, Leland. Number three, your recovery is time sensitive. Your recovery is time sensitive. I'll go over Psalm 27 again. Psalm 27:14. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Sergio, love you, brother. You cannot force your recovery. That's something that I've come to understand, and many of the people that I know that come to understand. You can't force your recovery. You're going to have to wait. So when it comes to the example that I gave about my accident, I needed to have it diagnosed, treated, and processed. I couldn't ignore the fact that, and this is what happens with trauma, right? Whether it's physical or emotional, there are levels of it that require different levels or different time frames of recovery. So you can't force your recovery based on the timeline that you desire to have. We're gonna have to wait. It's easier to diagnose a physical wound than to diagnose an emotional, psychological, spiritual, or soul wound. In the process of your recovery, it's necessary to acknowledge all of these areas to diagnose where the wound lies. One of the things that we fail to many times in the process of our recovery is to really stop and diagnose what is the area that was hurt when I went through this, when I had this situation, when I had to deal with a person this way, when a person hurt me, whatever it is. See, we need to be able to diagnose exactly where the pain lies, because the pain does not lie any longer in the encounter, in the situation. The pain doesn't lie in the place of the past. There is the present pain. There is a present need for recovery that does not exist in the place of the past. So we need to be able to diagnose the wound doesn't lie in the moment of the trauma. I don't know if that makes sense. Andre, love you. The wound doesn't lie in the moment of the trauma. It is hidden in the area it caused you to have pain in. See, when I've had so many sports injuries, shoulders and my back and my ankles and my knees. My recovery for each and every one of those injuries had different time lapses and time frames and different treatments and different diagnoses. But the incident, however I injured myself, that's not what I needed to fix. In the midst of your recovery and whatever you are going through in this moment, it is important to understand that your pain, the dark place, the anxiety, the desperation, all these things, they are not existing in the place, in a frozen time, in place or situation that you can define in saying, I'm hurting because of this, that, and the other. No, your pain came from that traumatic incident, but it's hurting because it probably attacked your ego. It came against that you have concerning a person or a situation. It's causing you to mourn and go through a process of mourning. It's causing you to be confused. See, these are the symptoms that you are having to deal with, that we all had to deal with in a place. That if you don't address the place and the actual pain that was caused by the trauma, your mind and yourself, and even in your prayer, you will constantly go back into a place of blaming, into a place of accusation, into a place of resentment, into a place of hatred, into a place of anger, because you've forgotten that what was actually hurting, it was actually hurting in this moment, is what that traumatic incident attacked in you, or what it hurt in you, or the injury that it hurt in you, that it caused in you. The wound of the trauma is hidden in the area it caused you to have pain. That's why you can't recover by being angry at the situation or at the person. You start to recover when you know exactly what it is that it hurt, and you make the conscious step towards getting up. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing here. If you're following, if you're commenting, and you're sharing, we need to be able to see what it is that in us, what it is in us that we have, that is innate to us, that allow us to be able to get up from certain situations, that allows us to be able to move on, that allows us to be able to recover in order to get our strength back and move on how God wants us to move on. Because if we deal with trauma from a very carnal perspective, then we're probably going to go around circle and stay in that place for longer than we were intended to do. There is a wisdom that comes that we are able to appreciate when we suffer well. You will recover in spite of trauma. Whoever inflicted the trauma to you was probably not trying to hurt you on purpose. You were, I don't like saying victim, but what you went through came from a place of ignorance of someone that never dealt or learned how to deal with their trauma the right way, ignoring the things and not knowing how to apply things with wisdom. And you were just in the way of that. So are we going to be able to have mercy and practice and enact our forgiveness in our lives? And number 3, your recovery is time sensitive. Take your time and process what God is telling you to process in this moment and where you need to heal in order for you to be able to move on from the situation in a healthy manner and be able to get up. Because remember, you are designed to get up. "30 minutes on the dot." I thank you all for coming in today or this evening to be able to have this discussion, or just allow me to be able to just freely express myself when it comes to recovery. I think the biggest thing about recovery, and if you're a Christian, if you're a believer, is understanding that the traumatic experience will never disappear. The traumatic experience, however and whomever it came through, is always going to be there. What's most important, being able to address the pain, understand what are the signs and symptoms, where is the pain hiding, in order for you to be able to heal. I think one of the points the Holy Spirit gave me, and I said it earlier, is God didn't redeem us or restore us back to Him, erasing the reality of sin from our memories or from history. Sin is existing and is defined even in the Bible for us to be able to understand what it is and how it came to be and how it affects our life. The memory of sin, of how sin came to be, is written and is in place for us to be able to see that this is the traumatic experience that a man and a woman had that led to how we live life and God and our spirituality and the challenges that we have. So that would always be there. But God gave us the answer and gave us the tools and the strategies that in order for us not to be able to be still trapped and condemned to death, He healed from what that traumatic experience caused. That I believe that He wants to do that with you as well in this moment. Because that's the way our Father operates. That's the way that He does things, where He's not going to remove the memory of what happened. He's not going to remove the memory of what you did. He's not going to remove those things. Those things are going to be there, and they're going to be tools and things that we have for the rest of our lives. It's going to allow us to be able to move in wisdom. But if we heal correctly, if we recover correctly, and if we seek Him in this moment, to be able to get past that traumatic experience, the recovery will be there because it is your portion. It is what you have been designed for. And He has given you the tools and the equipment necessary to be able to get up from this situation. So I love you. God bless you. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, your night, your weekend. And I'll see you next week for another session of Design to Get Up. God bless you.